What are you doing out there, Roger?
Okay. Good evening and welcome. Go ahead. Good evening and welcome to our city council meeting. Our first city council meeting of 2021. So glad to be in the new year. And ask if Grant Tuesday will lead us in the pledge of allegiance to the city of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All it is before we begin this meeting. Thanks for blessings for working the place that it is. Here, as we discuss the business of the city, we pray for this spirit of guidance. Do right by all those interested parties. Do our best. And for this blessing in the name of Jesus Christ.
Please, thank you. Have the agenda before you. The additions or changes. So I urge you to adopt that.
So,
Second.
Make sure I got the mic here so we'll get good sound before it's going to Bruce made a motion and Roger had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, agenda stands adopted. We have minutes from our previous city council meeting. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, the minutes will stand adopted, and we'll have Alan next take us through our follow-up and action items.
The community center, we talked about that this past week. We've received some preliminary designs that we're looking at right now. We've had some discussions with the library board. At some point, the designs will be heavily relying on the library director, library staff, and library board. We're moving towards that in the coming weeks. Emergency response plan, the EOC tech upgrades at the fire station will be going just like this meeting room that you're seeing here, a similar fashion, so that we can be well equipped for any emergency at our emergency operations center. Website upgrades, we met on that today. They have a goal to be done with that by the early February, so they're shooting for that right now to upload all of the forms. And HR Navigator, we kind of pumped the brakes on HR Navigator. It has some redundancy with our existing system right now. Water treatment plant, it's really offline. They do a once a year maintenance on that. And they're using the wells. They rely solely on the wells this time of year when the demand is low. And this next meeting, just one more update, we'll probably have another update from Lance regarding our water master plan. So after the last meeting, it might be good to come in and just give one more in-depth update to the city council, because those will be very large budgetary items coming up in the next few months for approval. Sewer, you've probably seen a few of the different operations going around. They're slip lining a few of the sewer after they did the ultrasonic camera of the entire system. They've gone through fixing some of the spots that need fixing through the system that were discovered through the ultrasonic study that took place. Streets, you'll probably see something. Right now, obviously, they're doing a lot of plow preparation or repairs after each storm. Their stormwater audit, which relates to the item below, but we're being audited for the first time, and every I think every 6 to 8 years we do that, and we're up for our audit this year. It's pretty intensive, the things that they need to prepare. But you'll probably see kind of an annual thing. We did this last year, where we brought in and we just said, here's the streets projects for this coming year. Here's the road surface treatment projects for this coming year. Just a very basic table. And then we post that on our website to let citizenry know this is exactly what we're going to be focusing on this year. And so you'll probably see that in the next meeting. Engineering, we're still working on our 300 East. We're probably going out to bid on that. Remember, that's that grant that we applied for. We're successful in obtaining. We're going to try and straddle that over to the end of this fiscal year and the beginning of next fiscal year this summer, and see how much we can get done with that project along 300 East. I think that'll be a very good project for improving not only the road, but also the water line in that area. 3100 North, obviously, kind of on pause for the next couple months until the snow clears, and then we'll finish that in the late spring, early summer. Parks, they're obviously helping heavily with plowing and preparing for a few items, but they're very involved right now in master planning. So the parks are developing their master plans right now, going through that with a few interns and park staff, planning for everything that's coming up. And then actually looking at the options for the BMX course, if we can get some donations lined up, some designs for the area there by the green waste bins. And people are very excited about that. We hear that around the community, so it's a needed feature within our park system. Trails, again, we're working on trails, working with each of the property owners along with some of the canal trails. As far as rec goes, basketball started this past week. It was a very good turnout. Again, we still have like 800 people participating in our basketball program, which is just huge. A few of the other programs opted not to run their programs this spring, or even seeing some spillover coming to our direction, but we basically couldn't handle any more with our current facilities. So hats off to Jesse for putting that together, though, and running that, and still working with the Bear River Health Department to make sure that individuals are safe that are participating at this time. Jumping through facilities, you can see all the upgrades we're doing right now and throughout all of the facilities, and the library lights we've talked about beforehand. Cemetery, we did have the opportunity to put the wreaths on the veterans' graves the past couple of weeks, which was great. Good opportunity to do that with the cemetery board. Coming down through here, we'll see a few things from community development. One of the things that they've been working on really heavily, we'll talk about tonight, is the short-term rentals, which they've worked on for quite some time. Economic development, we're still working on that master plan. The CRA we'll talk about tonight in this meeting. Treasurer, we're still going through the finalization of the CARES Act grants, and also looking at cleaning up our paperless billing, and also our newsletter, our digital newsletter options. This part of business license, we talked about that. The first billing for October through December will go out in early January, and you've probably received an email about that. We'll probably have some discussion on that in the coming weeks regarding that before the bills actually are sent. End of year for human resources, very busy time. Recorder, we'll probably do a budget revision in this next meeting before we start talking about anything for next year, kind of revising this year's budget and bringing it up to date. Scott's updated everything with the actuals already, and you'll see probably a quarterly report soon also associated with that. Library, they're doing their writing contest. We've talked about the library designs and the community center. They're very busy right now with those programs. Police, we'll hear some stats later tonight. Chief Black is here. We'll go over those items. And then as far as fire department goes, we've talked about a few things related to the fire department, but they are, one, we have the Community Connect program that we're still trying to get people to sign up for. We've had a pretty good turnout on that. I think we need to get a few more individuals signed up for that. But that's basically the report for now, unless there's other questions on specifics or anything I've skimmed over too quickly.
Any questions on this? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward to our next item, which is recognition for an exemplary staff member. This evening, our recognition is for Ireland Yoka, who I think is here with us tonight. Are you Ireland, I think? Yeah, excellent. Ireland works the front desk at the library multiple days each week. And oftentimes during the afternoon hours, which are the busiest for us at the library. Very cheerful attitude, very helpful, excellent customer service orientation, and also does a great job of helping and supporting her coworkers by being willing to take shifts that other people might not be as enthusiastic about taking, and just goes out of the way to do whatever she can to help out the library. This has led James Bridge, our library director, to try to persuade Ireland to go get a Master of Library Science, which sounds like a great idea to me. So, Ireland, thank you so much. Usually we have you come up and such under the current health guidelines. I'll just ask everyone to join me in a round of applause for thank you, Ireland. Okay. Next up, we have consider appointing a representative from North Logan City to serve on the Cache Valley Transit District Board. Bruce, we had been serving in that position for a period of time, and after visiting with Bruce, we felt like it was a good idea to make a change there. Bruce and I talked about it a little bit and said, where are we going to find someone who just knows everything there possibly is to know about buses and mass transit systems? I realized that the most qualified person in the valley for that, this board, lives across the street from Bruce and just around the corner from me. If you guys don't know Ron Bushman, Ron has spent much of his professional career managing transit networks and engaged in that line of work nationally, involved in a wide range of innovative things in transit practices, and is a high integrity, public service oriented individual. And so, if you nominate someone who is not a member of the city council for a position on this board, it requires the city council's approval. And so I'm here this evening asking for the council's support in confirming Ron Bushman as North Logan's nominee to that position.
I move that we approve Ron Bushman.
Okay, Bruce, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Bunny. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, that was it. Ron, thank you. We really appreciate your willingness to serve on this board and to lend your expertise. Thank you very much. Well, thank you.
One thing I would just openly add is if he has things that he gets at meetings and needs to come forward, and urge him to be with Alan. We'll give you time because obviously it's a big enough thing in the valley, and obviously with tax dollars to let one of us know if we need to know something. The nice thing with the city council person, we're here, but just know that whenever you need time or get with us.
Thanks, Roger. Okay, next up, we have considered a resolution regarding the ice arena project for the city pledge of sales tax revenue. Alan, do you want to introduce this one, or Scott?
I can take you through just kind of a very quick overview of this tax. 5 years ago, the Ice Center came before the City Council to request a 10-year extension of the 164% sales tax. This generates about $48,000 per year from North Logan City and from Cache County and Hyde Park that also participate in additional revenue source. At that time, when they came in for the City Council, the City Council gave the Ice Arena a few kind of homework items they wanted the Ice Center to look at, approaching Logan and talking with a few other people, and looking at becoming completely independent of this tax in the 10-year period. And they gave them those kind of obligations, and they fulfilled those obligations. They did approach Logan. And what I've been told is that at the end of the 10 years, they'll have enough in their endowment and their yearly return on that endowment will match basically what we're giving in sales tax. So at that time, at the end of the 10 years, they will be completely independent. They won't need the North Logan City portion of the tax. But at that time when that was approved, in our resolution, it says 5 years. Whereas in that presentation, they were asking for the 10 years is what was discussed. And then Hyde Park and Cache County approved a 10-year extension on that actual tax. So what they're asking for is that our 5-year extension just be extended another 5 years, but with that same understanding that they would be independent at the end of the 5 years, and that be part of the obligation. The other thing that they've talked about is actually we've developed a good relationship with them. We've provided some landscaping for them the past few years through some service projects and other things, and they want to provide a free skate night for all the residents of North Logan. They've thrown that into the mix to help out, to get people familiar with the ice center who may not go there pretty regularly. And so that's basically what you see before you in the resolution. I can go over a lot more details in the other presentations that have given us a lot of information, but the gist of it is that at the 5-year mark, I don't know why we approved it at 5 years. It probably should have been the 10-year mark. So it's just asking for that extension for the 10 years. But at that point, I would just make a recommendation that you approve it the same way that was approved the last time, with the kind of condition that they are independent at the end of those 10 years. So an additional 5 years at this point.
Questions, comments, thoughts from the council?
I have a few, I guess. Roger, being that you were the ones that would have been around for the previous one, this is I guess one would be, it seems that was what was, I don't truthfully like it if it were here at front of me and asking for the money, I probably don't know. I feel like it's kind of a county-wide thing, and there's no total benefit to that degree of money we're giving them. That said, I feel some obligation, it appears, but it was intended to give it to them for that much time. I suppose we could spend money on worse things than an ice arena. But I do struggle with it a little bit. And I would like to hear your take from those who were here before with the original agreement and thoughts on that. But it's a little bit of a stretch for me to just hand over those tax dollars, because certainly we could use them to do a lot of good things in North Logan. And we chose to give it to the ice arena, where I'd like to see them stand on their own. I know that's the end goal, but I'm a little bit struggling with it.
Well, I'd say 3 things I remember from number 1, when they came to present. I remember, obviously, they show you all the numbers. They're big numbers when you talk building like that, and maybe not everybody doing it. One thing I appreciate is managed well enough that, as you see the presentation, they, and especially if you've been to the different fundraisers they've done, like Spice on Ice, I felt confident enough in that decision, saying they backed up through their actions from even attending there and doing different things, that I don't think that's just empty words, that I do feel it will be self-sufficient in 5 years. So number 1, I remember. Secondly, I know with the Olympics, and I don't understand the county, but I know that some of it when the Olympics came, that was one reason it came in. And I know that some of, obviously, and you go to any other community and they get the benefit from it, so it's nice there. But I also see where a lot of the Cache County schools use it. I mean, I do see the benefit where my kids go on a regular basis. So I felt it was a worthwhile thing, especially when it's cold outside, not a lot to do, it's cold in there. But so, and I do remember the 10 years, but I do remember them presenting it very professionally, saying, hey, this one last little bit will be on our own. And they had numbers that they were close to that, but just needed that.
Yeah, I don't have a great deal of memory of some of the specifics on this for my own part, but in going back and reviewing the minutes and looking at the circumstance, I think it's similar to Roger's recollection, and it seemed right. My leanings are to support, well, I don't have a vote on this tonight, but my leanings are to support the additional 5 years. But to be clear and perhaps even emphatic that the intent of the city is that when that 5 years is up, that the SRO needs to stand on its own. And reviewing materials from the last round of discussions, the council at that time was fairly emphatic.
One item that they provided, sorry, I forgot, I skimmed over these, but they have a long, I mean, there's PowerPoints that show their previous plan, but this is the updated payment schedule. The reason that the 5 years doesn't fully help them get to the point where they need is because you look at the 5 year, they'll be at 1.3 million in their endowment, but by year 10, they already have it laid out. I asked them for a clear plan, and they have that in place, and it's $2 million that they'll have. The interest earned each year is 77,000, which replaces the existing sales tax contributions of the 3 entities and then a little bit more. And so at that point, that's why they said, yeah, we have a sure plan to get to that point where we will be independent at that point. So hats off to them for actually providing the actual data and the numbers.
It's important to note, and just to emphasize that the only reason we're talking about this is because it was a clerical error. And this would have been approved and was approved for 10 years. And they are in good faith keeping with that.
Mhm.
And so seem to be on track to do accomplish exactly what we're wanting them to do. So if it's okay, I'd like to go and make a motion that we approve and make this change so that it goes to 10 years.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Just have one question.
Okay.
Since the motion on the-
Well, let me see if there's a second, we'll have further discussion. If there's no second, the motion dies for lack of a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, Leslie is seconded. Is there any further discussion? Yes, there is. Go ahead.
No, it's just a quick question, but for those of you that were here or if you reviewed the minutes, was it pretty straightforward that we committed 10 years? I'm still not here directly, but that's exactly what was committed to in those notes.
I do think that was the intent.
Okay. I still stand by my second.
The power.
Say you probably want to add that they are self-sufficient in the motion.
Yeah, all the requirements are the same and they need to fulfill them. That doesn't change.
Makes sense. Any other additional discussion? I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Excellent. We have a good working partnership, as Alan said, with the ice arena. We want that to continue. We would love to see the success. Next up, we need to convene is the North Logan Redevelopment Agency to review the draft plan and budget for the new CRA. So I entertain a motion to convene in CDA, CRA, as the redevelopment agency in that session. Okay, we have a motion to that effect. All in favor? Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are now in redevelopment agency session. You have the agenda for the redevelopment agency before you, and I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for this meeting with CRA as presented.
So
We'll give it to Craig. Is there a second?
second.
Leslie has a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we are talking about the Four Seasons adjustment here, I think. Is that right?
No, the first item on the agenda is the we're talking about the draft plan and the budget for the new proposed community reinvestment area. And Cody Dieter is here. He's been the expert that's been helping us along the path for creation of a CRA.
Fantastic. Take it away.
Oh, yeah, the 250.
Yes. Which one is it up here? Is it the?
The actual plan, but there was a presentation.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Hear me okay? So we met in November to talk about the initial step, which is to adopt a survey resolution that outlines the basic parameters of the boundaries of the CRA. And then the authorization came out, staff and consultant both draft us project area plan, project area budget. And that plan and budget is in your packet. It's a long document. A lot of it is statutorily driven. But what's most important in the plan and the budget is what is it we're trying to accomplish, and what funds do we think are available to accomplish that. And because this is property tax, there is a requirement that you consult with other taxing entities that levy a tax in your city, so that you can come to an agreement with them to use those funds for economic development purposes. So rather than going through that full document with you, I'll just go over some highlights of those things which I think are most pertinent for you. So if we go to the next page there now. So the goals and objectives of the plan, just a couple of highlights, and we'll go into these in more detail, is things that are, I think, that stand out and make this a good plan is that you have a targeted approach. And what I mean by that is you haven't selected huge sections of your city and include all of those as parcels that you'll collect tax increment on. You're going to be selective in just selecting those parcels that are vacant and have the highest opportunity to improve. The second is that you're currently drafting an economic development plan. And so this document links directly to that economic development. There's 4 sectors, we'll talk about that in more detail, but you have 4 areas that you're focusing on, and this CRA links directly to those objectives. And so the feeling should be from other taxing entities that you're being thoughtful and you're being cohesive in your thinking, rather than just saying, oh, shoot, we hope something will happen. You're thinking long term and being very strategic about this. The next thing we'll talk about is your tax increment strategy, how we're trying to incentivize businesses and the structure of how we'll do that. And then we'll talk about the potential sources and uses of revenue over a 25-year period to fund specific improvements. All right, so if you go to the next slide. All right, so again, there are 4 specific areas that you're focusing on. Let's actually go to the next slide. That might be easier to see the full map, which is, yeah. So there's these 4 areas that you have selected in your community, and as you can see, there's green highlighted sections, and there's some green and purple. The green and purple are parcels that are currently in a redevelopment agency project area already, and the green are parcels that are basically vacant and that have blight or kind of run down that are not currently meeting their highest and best use. So these could be areas where you can see improvements that would bring jobs to the and sales tax and property tax back to the community. And those are the same that are outlined in your economic development plan. Let's go to the next one there. So here are the specific areas, the 4 specific areas. So manufacturing and commercial, the city center, Main Street South, and Main Street North. And as you can see, each of these areas has a different focus of what we're trying to accomplish. So in the manufacturing commercial, which is closer to the airport, the focus is industrial job creation. We're trying to get good paying jobs in that area. And so what would we be using tax increment for? Primarily for infrastructure and potentially incentives for some of those businesses to come into your community and relocate here. Just as a side note, anytime there's a EDCU comes out with, trying to bring a company into the state or keep a company that's here, they have an incentive package, and they're always going to ask you as a city to be a participant and provide that incentive. So this is a great opportunity for you to set the groundwork for if there's an out-of-state or in-state that wants to stay. The second area is the city center,
And the focus will be on mixed use office and commercial. The hope is that the continuation of what's happening in Four Seasons, where you have some of that ground level commercial with some living on top of that, and see that kind of grow throughout that area. And the purpose of tax increment would be for infrastructure and again, some incentives if it's necessary. Main Street South is primarily around the Kmart building. And the goal would be to make that an anchor tenant area. So you'd see that become something, as you know, it's in process, but become an area where it improves, you get more pads there. So you're not incentivizing the pads, you're just incentivizing that core anchor retailer to come in. So we're talking about reimbursing them for rehab and for infrastructure that might be needed. Main Street North, really talking about improving access for commercial. A lot of just parcels that are just not meeting their highest and best use, and mostly vacant. So the goal would be let's improve some infrastructure access to those parcels and see if we can get some people from there. Does that make sense? Kind of the goal. That's the driving goal. You can read that full document, but that's really what you need to see is that that's the goal and purpose, and will be spelled out in more detail in the economic development plan. All right, let's talk about the next slide, which is vendor tax increment strategy. So we want to be targeted in how we incentivize businesses. So rather than just providing everyone the same type of incentive, we're really saying, hey, if you're a manufacturing or industrial business and you're going to relocate in our city, and you're creating jobs that are 110% of the prevailing county wage, we want you to be here. We really want you to be here. We're going to provide up to 75% rebate under taxes and property tax for up to 20 years. So that's the highest incentive structure. And the second would be an anchor retailer that's above 50,000 square feet. We want that to be the hub for economic development. So that would be up to 60% for 15 years. Office and non-retail, 50% for 10 years. And then other ancillary retail, anything below 50,000 square feet. They don't need a huge incentive, they're likely to come anyway. So it's more of a getting them over the hump. And so it's up to 25% for 5 years. So it's smaller and shorter. And then residential would be no incentive for residential units coming into these project areas. So that's what Alan and I and the staff have worked through. We think that this is something that's taxing entities will like more than just saying, hey, we want 75% for 20 years, which is kind of what we hear most of the time. So any questions about that strategy and the purpose behind it?
We can have some more discussion on that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And then let's just review quickly the next slide, the budget. This just highlights some of the potential revenues that could come over the next 25 years. I just took an absorption and ran through the assumptions with Alan and his staff of what could potentially happen in these areas. So each of these areas, we're thinking over 25 years, we generate $47 million in tax increments, so additional value above what we're currently seeing. That's across all property taxing entities. The biggest would be the school district. On a present value basis, using a 5% discount rate, that's like $21 million. So it's a pretty significant increase. So that's what we're going to want. And then if you look at how much of that will flow to the actual taxing entities versus flowing to this board to direct, 31 to 32 would be flowing back to those taxing entities. So over 25 years. So most of it's going to flow back to them. Right? And one of those reasons is because we have that structure where we're not going 20 years on every incentive. It's 5 years for some, 10 years for some, and 15 years for some. So they're really going to be a good bang for their buck in helping encourage and incentivize some of these entities to come in. Let's look at the next one. So this would be the budget for the project area. What will come back to this board for you to allocate. be approximately 15.5 million over a 25-year period. And what I'm suggesting to the board would be that, 60% roughly of that would go toward infrastructure. So that's mostly horizontal type infrastructure where you're helping get parking lots, water, sewer, those type of infrastructure to help get businesses in and get access. And then 30% would go towards incentives. So that might be, hey, if you post-performance incentives that will, if you're bringing jobs in, we're going to give you a direct incentive. Or, for example, the Kmart building, we might say, hey, if you're going to put something in there, we want to let you know that we think that's a great benefit to our community, and we'll provide you just a direct incentive that you can use as you feel appropriate. And then 10% would go to housing. That's a statutory requirement. If you collect more than 100,000, we think you'll collect more than 100,000 annually, then 10% of it needs to be allocated toward housing, and specifically to fulfill the low to moderate housing section in the region, which you currently have. So that is the majority of the presentation. The next steps are to really make up. Sorry, there's one more slide here, which is what's the current value of the property that we're including? It's $22 million, and over 25 years that will generate about $6 million, depending on what the tax rates go. So by putting this project area in place, you can generate an additional $47 million above that. So that's kind of the numbers as I see it. And then just the last slide here is what are the next steps? Well, of course, it's for you to think about this plan and budget. If you're comfortable with it, we can make modifications to the plan and budget. But really the next step after that is let's go meet with the county and the school district. Those are the two largest tax communities. And walk them through the plan, what we're trying to accomplish. And from my experience, having the mayor there would be ideal in those discussions, and just get a temperature of where they are. And if there are changes that they are wanting to make, let's come back and talk about those as a board before we adopt these as the final plan and budget. So we only have to notice this plan and budget one time because it is a 30-day noticing period. So it's a longer one usually. You have to notice every property owner. And so you may get a lot of questions. People think you're raising their taxes when they get a notice that says, what is this project area? So it's helpful to have one notice rather than 2 or 3. So, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions or go through anything in more detail.
I think there's a lot to discuss here, but I just want to clarify one thing, both for myself and perhaps for the council. I think that what you're asking us, or what we're considering authorizing tonight, is this is just kind of a first step saying, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to go through a public hearing process and those sorts of things. We're not authorizing the incentive package tonight. I have some feedback I'd like to share and some ideas built up there. Where I presume we could even change the boundaries, choose to do some portion of this, not to do others. This is just kind of the first step that sets things up. And I do think there's a lot to discuss here, but I also would commend the council that starting the ball rolling in first steps. Is that a good summary of the action you're asking for tonight?
Yeah, I really just wanted to bring this to your attention. So you had some, last time was just a high level, and this is more, okay, what do the numbers really look like? What is the structure? But we can change all of that. We can't make the project area bigger without adopting a new resolution, but you can make it smaller and exclude parcels that are currently in there. But everything else is on the table for you to modify.
Thank you. Questions from the council?
I guess one quick question I have, this is just general. So let's say it's approved, adopted. You use the term, we can give up to 20 years. I guess we legally can say, well, this business is not as big. We're going to only give you up to 5 years if you're in the industry. You don't have to give everybody the same in that area. Is that correct?
Yes.
And administering that, is that?
Yes. Yes, that's right. It can be tailored.
Yeah.
So
You don't get into trouble tailoring if one business talks and compare. But I don't know the rules of, when you give one, you have to match to the other,
I think legally there's not as much, the parameters aren't there, but certainly politically, we want to be wise.
Consistent with the same time.
Yes. Yeah. I put up to in that document just because it's helpful to have some, not tie your hands and future council's hands too much, but you want to certainly be consistent.
Big box store, similar, you know.
Yes, you want to treat them, or have a good rationale, like, the Kmart building's a perfect example. Hey, we're gonna do something here. Well, there's not any other vacant Kmart buildings in the project area, so you can kind of treat them differently than everybody else, but it's a manufacturing business, you like them more than another for various reasons.
For the benefit, I know there's not a lot of public here, we do have a number of people online, I do want to clarify something that you mentioned earlier. This is not a tax increase. It's just a matter of whether taxes that are already going to be collected then channel into a different place than they would have been where they otherwise would have accrued. We use those monies to increase, to support infrastructure so that the value of the property increases, business can come, and then that generates additional revenues ultimately. Not by increasing taxes, but just by having more vibrant, valuable business. Any other questions or discussion here?
Just a comment that I'd like to make. First off, I'd like to say thank you for the hard work that goes into this. It's a lot. And if you want to see evidence of how some of this works, look at this up on the Logan right now. Think about it about 5 years ago. And what it looks like now, the businesses that are going in there. And that's how those things happen. There's more to it. It's more complex than that. But that's a big part of it. And if this type of a tool helps the city to be able to attract the kinds of businesses that the city would like to have, because the city is ultimately powerless to decide who really is going to come and be a business in our city. Ultimately, it's going to be up to a business owner or developer, and they're just going to come if they think it's best. But doing things like this gives us a little bit of ability to go ahead and help people that we would like and kind of frame what the city looks like. And so it's a great tool. As I think about specifically some of these areas and some of these opportunities that we have going forward over the next 20 years, this will be a very helpful tool for us to attract those correct businesses and incentivize our businesses. And not only that, as those businesses come in and they make their home in the city, while it does cost us something in the beginning to get going, we see an ultimate increase in property value and tax revenues over time. And that's a big reason. So it's not just let's have a cash outlay or get money back to a business. It's how do we make this more valuable to the city and our tax revenue sources over time. And so I think it's a very, very important thing for us to be able to do. Sometimes it's hard to understand, and there's not every municipality behaves well with it. There's been some cases where maybe it hasn't worked out like it was intended, but it's a well thought out plan with the right rules in place to keep it in line is a very, very good useful thing for the city. So.
I was just hoping for a little bit of clarification and to make sure I understand the CRA. Right now, we collect some amount of taxes from this area. It goes directly to the city in our general fund. Would that amount continue to go to the city in the general fund, and then only the incremental more taxes and growth would go into the CRA budget?
That's right. So the base year value right now is 22 million. So the tax, when you apply your tax rate to that, that will continue through the life of the project. And then only a lot that would go towards the city.
The only way the city would get less in the general fund is if the certified tax rate, if we adopt this, the only way the city gets less in the general fund, even with this adoption, is if the certified tax rate goes down. And that can happen by the council adjusting it or by the truth in taxation processes. We know that has some shift in flux and that could generate it, but highly unlikely to see that. But we have seen property values depreciate significantly.
Sorry.
Go ahead, President.
Just one question I have. So as we look at this looks pretty tailored to North Logan City, and as we're competing with other municipalities. Is the increment rate set at, how do we make sure that we're competing at a decent rate with the competing? city to our, adjacent to us? Is there limits that we're all held to, for example?
So not statutorily, but what I would say is the industry standard is 75% for 20 years.
Okay, and that would be the industry.
Yeah, that's kind of what you see as a starting point, but there's been a lot of pushback over the last few years of just having kind of a one size fits all, especially when it comes to you're highly reliant on negotiating with other taxing entities. And the school district is the hardest because if you got elected to the school board, the last thing you're thinking about, whether that's right or wrong, is how do I get economic development in my school district to increase tax revenue? That's probably why that's not the reason you ran, but they drive that significantly. They drive economic development, whether they're interested or not. And so it's hard for those school board members to get their arms around this. And so it's helpful to have lower rates for projects where, because the argument is, if we don't provide an incentive, are these businesses going to come anyway? And if they do, why are we providing them an incentive? So that's why, okay, if it's a retailer that's below 50,000 square feet, we'll give them a 5 years of, we're not going to incentivize them.
Can I add to that just for a second? Because I think it's important to state how highly competitive of an environment it is between municipalities when it comes to economic development, bringing entities to your city that are going to create revenue positive tax dollars over time. And it's extremely competitive. And there is one city in our valley that has a person that does that full time. And that city does exceptionally well, and not only bringing those things to their city, but also finding out what other city is talking to somebody else and bringing those things to their city. And so when it comes to what are the rules of the game? Well, it's a very competitive game. So how bad do you want that company to come, and what do you anticipate the benefits to be in your city over time? All play into the decision of how to incentive package together. And I've had the opportunity to sit with site selectors. Their first question is, what's your incentive package? And it's not because, it's because every city has an incentive package. And if you want to play the game, it's like going to a baseball game without a mitt. And so you wouldn't do it. And that's what we need here to be able to compete in that arena if we want to be able to do it. So it's very important.
Yeah, it's intriguing. That's good perspective, Bruce. It's fascinating to see too that one city that I think you're referring to is also dealing with different schools, education, different district. And so that's part of my question was how do we make sure we can stay competitive with one neighbor in particular, though there's more. But that helps.
Well, when this discussion comes up more in earnest than we need to dig into it tonight, my preference and the things that I've heard in economic development trainings from the league and such are that more and more businesses are preferring more incentives up front rather than incentives stretched out over a very long period of time. No one wants to open a shop and say, well, we can make it for 10 years because we have tax increment subsidy, and then when the 10 years is up and the subsidy goes away, the business is viable. So when a business is coming and working, more and more, my sense from what I'm hearing is they're looking for upfront support to offset the cost of starting up and opening, but they need to be up and running on a sustainable basis within a couple of years. Otherwise, it's just not going to be viable in the long run. So I have personally, based on that, what I've heard and what I've been taught on that front, I have a lot of hesitancy at looking at something that's going to be providing support on that kind of time horizon, unless it's in a very specific set of circumstances where that's really what makes sense for the business and where the community can compete if there's some specific reasons. But so again, we don't have to approve this tonight. I have some reservations. I think we should have some continued robust discussion on that.
I just want to add one more thing to that comment because I think it's a good one. Obviously, if the city is going to this isn't, put a plan together and reach out to whoever and give them money. You know, they're, from the city's perspective, it's somewhat of a marriage in that you're looking at it and you along with the business have a shared interest in the success. Just like you just said, we're not going to court somebody who wants to come in and then take money and leave. That could happen, but you know, business like the hotel in the South End that just got built, but those they're not going to put that kind of money into a facility like that and exit. And so you can look at some things and see who has a better chance of sticking around and who doesn't, and do the due diligence to make a good decision on how to play the game and who you want to incentivize. So again, this isn't something that you just offer to anybody who walks through the door necessarily. It really is. This is a way for the city to look and kind of make some decisions and decide this is the type of business that we want to do. This is where we want to grow our community. This type of business, and we can offer some incentives to get. I think we basically know what kinds of businesses we want. We have a general idea what they are, and it's a chance to get them instead of just waiting and hoping and crossing our fingers that someone shows up that we like.
Speak to the mayor's point regarding these numbers, and sorry to blindside you with this, Cody. One of the taxi entities we have talked with, they are also looking in that shorter term for different reasons. They want to see a return quickly over a 5 to 10 year period is kind of what they've encouraged us to do. Damon's point, Mayor, regarding businesses is, if we've heard that pretty consistently, the capital is what they're really looking for help and infrastructure get up and running in the first 2 to 5 years. But then the other entity has told us, if I'm not mistaken, they're about 5 to 10 years. They don't want to look much beyond that point. Just keep that in your mind. I like how you put up to, so it gives us some leeway, but we may need to discuss those numbers and maybe tone them down. And
A lot of discussion. We can have a lot of different directions we can go strategy-wise. And I'm glad we've been able to have some initial discussion on that tonight. And actually, I'd encourage folks, as you think about this, we've got a 30-day shot clock that we're running on noticing if we adopt this tonight. Get the notice out, and then we'll convene again to have more discussions on this. But if you have thoughts on these things and what the parameters ought to look like, please relay them back to Ellen and I, and we can get in touch, circle up, and kind of tighten up this proposal a little bit for down the road.
It seemed wise to move as quickly as possible. I mean, we're seeing just extraordinary growth all of a sudden here. It's not going to stop, I imagine. So I would just be in favor of moving as quickly as possible. I know there's a lot of work to do. We have required notification periods, but that would be my motion.
That's what I'm saying.
It sounds like a motion.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you don't have the toolbox ready. I mean, if you read the Herald Journal front page and you hear some of those names in there and they're looking, and you don't have your arrows ready to fire, you're left behind. So I think the arrows need to be sharpened. So if anybody has some major questions, then we need to, get them in.
Yeah, and my suggestion moving forward would be, let's get with the school district and the county as quickly as possible before we start the noticing period, so that we don't have to make major changes and renotice. Because I think it's fair to the public if you make major changes to this document to renotice that. So that's what I would suggest, is let's get with them in the next couple of weeks, have some discussions, and if they are thinking, and also get feedback from this body, then let's make changes to the document, and then let's be in a position to start noticing that maybe the 1st of February or something like that. That would be my suggestion.
Do we have a motion?
We don't have a formal motion on the board, but if you'd like to make one.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think out phrases. So we're looking just to approve the draft plan and budget?
yes,
Okay.
I don't think you need to formally make a resolution, but honestly, I think from my perspective, again, let's go, if you're generally feeling comfortable with this direction, then let's reach out to the county and the school district and have a meeting with them and get their feedback. And then we can have a formal, next week we can have a formal approval saying, yes, let's notice this document.
So the resolution in the packet, not what we need to copies.
Yeah, the resolution in the packet was from last.
Was the previous document, sorry, that's my fault. That's just a support document at this time.
I had not.
There you go. Okay, that's what
We've had a quick formal head nodding here.
Thank you, he's out here.
Let's circle together here. Give the council a little bit of time to really feedback to us, and then let's circle up in about a week. Get some meetings with the school board, the school district leadership, and the county mosquito abatement.
I know that the town just hired a new economic development.
Yes.
Sean Mill.
Mhm.
So he's
From
from Tooele.
Tooele.
So I know Sean, that's what we're looking at. So I'm happy to be with him.
Perfect.
Okay, next, we do need to consider an amendment to the Four Seasons South. That's under the RDA because it is an agreement between the RDA and Four Seasons, I think.
Yes, but I'd recommend probably just tabling this portion for this meeting, and we've had some comments back to the attorney. We still need to give Wasatch enough time to look over those comments and then get back with us. And so I'd recommend probably just tabling that item and shooting for next meeting.
Make a motion, we make the meeting shorter.
Terrible, is not a motion to table, is there a second? All in favor? On the table, that item, Chris was the second, and a motion to exit our redevelopment agency session and reconvene in regular closed session. So moved. Motion from Bruce, second from Craig, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're back in regular city closed session. Next up is an ordinance modifying North Logan City Code on land use to talk about short-term rentals. Spencer, I think this has been for planning commission. We have had a couple of a little bit of feedback on this from some residents. So I think we can have some good discussion on this issue. Spencer, why don't you kick it off first?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a preview. This has been in planning commission for a while now. We've had several meetings, a public hearing. It's gone back and forth with different advice and revisions. So it's been a little while and a little ways in the making here. Essentially, just to give you a brief overview, this ordinance would have short-term rentals, and that's defined as anything that's being rented for less than 30 days with remuneration involved. Would have them register or get a home-based business license. And there are some special requirements for that home-based business license, and that's what the ordinance would be adding, as well as a couple of revisions for land use code. So as far as the requirements, Planning Commission wanted to keep it extremely simple and just have the application be a home-based business license and have them kind of determine what the occupancy is there, parking spaces, and then just list noise. Basically wanted to have a way to contact people if there were complaints and be able to have a good feel on how many people were renting it out. A few other things we had to change in Title 12 that brought the public hearing was our use table had bed and breakfast lodging. It didn't have a short-term rental. The bed and breakfast, formal bed and breakfast, when looking at the definitions of that, hotel and motel, decided to kind of loop that in with a standard hotel or motel definition and then write a new definition for short-term rentals. So those are the changes to Title 12 land use. Yeah, so that's a brief overview of the ordinance as it stands. I could go over some of the questions that were presented by the citizens in the email as well regarding parking, and there were a few of them. But yeah, depending if you have questions first.
I guess the first thing I see, what's what I would call our guide for occupancy? Are we using code? So if somebody comes in and they say, I have an Airbnb in my basement and now I'm applying for home-based business, are we going in and saying, well, based on this, because you want to have some uniform thing, because I don't know, all of a sudden you create this ordinance, and all of a sudden you have to enforce it and do it, what's the guideline for that?
That's a great question. We talked about this point probably longer than any other. At first, they wanted to do 2 people per room. We actually talked with the attorney. He got back and said, well, it's just shaky ground on occupancy. If you really want to keep it in there, keep it in there, but I would recommend removing it. So what they kind of settled on was based a little bit on parking, off-street parking spaces. So they have the base of 2 spaces required, and then on top of that, additional parking spaces required based on occupancy. So essentially, whoever's applying for the permit can list their occupancy, but if they say 20 people, they're going to have to find space for X number of parking spaces, and the noise and other violations still stand intact. I don't know if the planning commission was 100% happy with that, but also just trying to tread the legal ground of restricting numbers of people, and just trying to find a good way to quantify it. Because by rooms was hard, square footage is difficult, depending on what that square footage entails, and how we verify measurements, things of that nature. So it's more of a trust system, backed up slightly with the parking that they sent with. One of the comments from the email as well, when we're on parking, we did have a base of 2 parking spaces. One of the comments from the citizens that maybe we will want to look into is if we want to keep 2 as the base. If you have a short-term rental, you need 2 extra spaces on top of your 2 required, or if it's kind of based on occupancy. So if they have a 1 or 2 person occupancy, maybe we start at 1 required space instead of requiring 2 spaces for a 1 person room. So yeah.
Just a comment, and I appreciate everything that's been done. This is new for the city as far as getting this stuff taken care of, and it's needed. And this, I think, will grow. I have seen the comments from some of the citizens. I've actually had somebody comment or talk with me individually. I think one of the things that I'd really like to see us do before we approve this is there's a feeling that they haven't had enough chance for dialogue, and that there's an interest in meeting maybe with the mayor or maybe a council member or 2 and having some discussions. I don't feel the urgency to push this forward without that opportunity. And I think their comments can be very valuable with the experiences that they're having as owners, to get better feedback on some of these things. Not to diminish anything the planning commission has done. Very much appreciate everything that's been done so far. I'd just like to see a little bit more opportunity for those owners also to have a little more dialogue versus just firing off some emails with some concerns. And so that way we can maybe even learn a little bit more and help them to get to where they need to be better. So just a thought.
I actually agree with that as well. I think, not to say that the public hearings weren't adequately notified, but this is an ever-changing area too. And I'm having a hard time grasping it. I saw on commission when we first looked at this, Spencer, and I don't know that we ever took a good look at how other cities are enforcing these ordinances. Maybe we have by now, and that's where this is based off of. But it's really hard to throw this right in front. And actually, parking is a great example. I thought when Matt Larson sent the email, he was spot on. A lot of these that I'm aware of are 1 or 2 people coming into a single bedroom, and it seems overkill to require 2 parking spots. We might be able to say you need to make sure you have adequate on-site parking off the road, something along those lines. And I do think it warrants a workshop, maybe just to make sure. I think we can do it quickly, an hour or 2, and be right and good alignment with people that actually run these and have a good idea of, the needs for that type of rental. So I would just echo what you said. If you do something like that, I'd be much more inclined to approve.
A little bit of background on this as well. When they started talking about this, the state legislators put a lot of restrictions as to what rules can be put in place regarding short-term rentals. Some that seem a little bit odd, in that you can't use the advertisement on a website like Airbnb as proof that someone has an Airbnb. How that makes sense, I don't know, but that is a literal state code. So when we started looking at this, and Spencer did quite an amount of homework on this, so in regards to your question of what we looked at as examples, some cities are extremely strict on this, as strict as they can be. knowing the limitations that the state has put on this. And some cities like Park City have looked into this and they just said, we have thousands of Airbnbs. We just want them to be safe. So what they did is they set up something almost similar to what we're doing. They just said they need to come in, they need to have an inspection. And we've talked about with Craig as well, make sure people are safe when they come in to use these, and made it as simple as possible. I think North Logan kind of took a little bit more aggressive than Park City, but we're definitely on that far end of not being extremely restrictive with this. As far as the notice goes, this is coming from Planning Commission 4 or 5 times. It's gone out in 2 or 3 newsletters. It's gone to a public hearing over the past 6 to 8 months. So there's been a lot of time. However, that doesn't mean that having more dialogue is, there's no urgency right now in passing it. So I have to fully agree with that. But as far as having a lot of notice, there's been no shortage of notice for this particular item.
Well, there's interest now.
Yeah.
So I think with that opportunity there, I think it's always good to involve people who have an interest in saying something, and especially if there's a great interest, and
Yeah.
the best solution possible for ourselves and property owners, citizens that are around the properties. I think that would help people.
I would just put that caveat on there. When you talk about it, just make sure you bring up that this is probably one of the least restrictive of a short-term
Well, that's what I was
ordinance.
gonna say, is actually be really good for folks that are running this to hear that from us.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked about enforcement is that you have 2 extremes. You have one city to the north that puts in their utility bills, which I get the properties there. Tell on your neighbor and we'll enforce it. You know, that's the occupancy rule. So, and they have a full-time person, and well, I've had people knock on their door and they say, we notice there's 4 cars out here and you're allowed 3 unrelated. Show me the lease or whatever. So, I mean, when you start getting enforcing, we need to have the tools in place for us too. And obviously, if we're kind of more lax, this make it easier. I'm not saying to be lax. I don't want to just pass something to not, and that's why I asked, well, define parking, you know, I have a 3-car garage and I'm not gonna be backing out overnight. So 1, 2, 3, I mean, how do I enforce that? And that's if I live in a cul-de-sac, there's no on the street because you're next to the next, you know, there's gonna be a little bit more, you know, I agree with, you know, safety and all that, but I get a little nervous with telling people, and you can go on Airbnb, talk to you guys, all these huge homes up in here, so they can afford it. A lot of them have Airbnb, and there's a big mansion, and they have a big mother-in-law apartment, and that's what they're doing their Airbnb on. So there's a type in North Logan, and this is how much you're talking about. So it's pretty big, you know, for our community. Not a small thing. That's how people are supplementing some of these payments, you know.
Yeah, and I agree, there's not necessarily an urgency. We haven't seen large problems. I think that the intent is to get ahead of the game. And also, like Alan said, to have a really light touch. I think the way that we try to set it up is to make sure it's easy, make sure it's not too restrictive. And if there's some ways we can help either educate or change it. It has gone through quite a few revisions, but I mean, let's get it right. So I agree that we should sit down and talk about it.
Maybe one comment. I wonder if the question's been asked, well, what is the parking fine as and what are the inspections? I think those are probably the 2 biggest items as far as what we're controlling. Maybe we could make up a little pamphlet of what that inspection would be and what the parking requirements might be. I think the parking's defined in the code, maybe just some really simple things that we can distribute it to them, because I think if they know what we're doing, it might not be as scary. I don't even know what we're gonna do for the safety inspection, but we can kind of give them ideas. You know, it might still less threatening if we have a little, so we need these things, we're probably gonna be fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes good sense. I think we want it to be straightforward, predictable, and easy, because there are ways for people to evade and choose not to comply with the law. And some things that the state legislatures then make it difficult for us to enforce if people do that. So let's make it easy to comply and straightforward. I agree, the planning commission has done a lot of work on this, as Bruce mentioned, and it's commendable work. And I think this group probably will want to do a little bit of
research and engage a little bit, just so we can feel comfortable with it as with its benefits. I do have a pending request that I haven't responded to yet since it's just with the city council this evening. I would be happy to meet with them and respond to that effect. Whether this passed tonight or not, I was still met with them. Do folks want to, is there anyone in the council that would particularly like to join in that discussion? Bruce, Buzzy? Okay. I'll reach out to them, find out and what time there might be, and then if there's a way for us to reach out to anyone else in the community that we know of and invite them to a meeting, probably organize either doing something here where we can distance or do it as an electronic meeting.
One,
Questions with the inspection, what might be required for that? I'd be more than happy to address that. It is a little tricky because you're dealing with generally an R3 structure, so you're putting an R1 in R3. But you can't really require to meet everything that an R1 requires in an R3 building. So, means an R1, you've got to have fire sprinklers, for example. You're not going to have all these people sprinkling their homes. It's just not going to happen. But the basics, working smoke alarms, adequate exits, an exit window, and a fire extinguisher. Probably about the basic safety things that will need to be addressed.
That brings up a good point. Who would do these inspections?
The fire building, very bold codes. So,
Mhm.
Both of them are contracted out, so we need to come up with a method for these to be accomplished.
similar to a business license, they go through. The only thing I would encourage, and this is just an encouragement, is when you meet, probably have Spencer with you to bring the, sorry, what word am I looking for? The institutional knowledge of having to go through this for the past several months of what has been discussed. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry. You might not either, Alan.
I'll try my hardest to get into that.
I could ask the planning commission if anybody,
There might be some interested.
yeah, would be interested in sitting in, so.
I'm excited to see this.
For our
Kudos to the planning commission. We couldn't ever quite get there, even though this is why they were.
It's not a lot of the discussion that we at the finish line.
Okay, I'm hearing no motion on the matter. We'll table it, bring it back in a couple of weeks. Next up is work session items, discussion regarding strategic directions for the city council for 2021. In some sense, this is New Year's resolutions for North Logan City. And so just, Alan reached out to a little bit about this. Want to take a minute to give each member of the city council an opportunity to talk about things that you would like to see the city moving forward on, the policy direction in the upcoming year. And Alan, are there other things I should introduce on the side in terms of things you're hoping to see?
No, I was going to do a long discussion of the 7 habits of highly effective cities and mission statements, goals. This is really just a discussion about what would each city council member and the mayor, just 2 or 3 areas of focus. And then I can organize them into this sheet. They call them strategic directives, but I can put them down below and we can just list them in this meeting. And then that'll give us some guidance as we develop our action items in each of the departments. Things you'd like to see, things that you're hearing from citizens, or you just have a specific direction you'd like to see the city go.
I think we should go youngest to oldest on the council. Why don't we get started?
Maybe,
The youngest to oldest, I mean, in terms of service. So
maybe by age.
Maybe, I don't know.
Pretty close. A couple things I thought about. I haven't put a ton of thought into this, I apologize. But, we talked a little bit tonight about economic development, and I think the RDA and the work between them is great. I think we need to be as aggressive as we've ever been. That's my general feeling of what's going on in this community right now. Specifically, there was I don't know if anybody saw the CNBC story for Cache Valley around the 2.4% unemployment rate during this pandemic. Stuff like that is just driving people here, and we're seeing it in our housing inventories. I think North Logan, we've seen some businesses leave. We've seen a little bit of waste in some of the buildings there. And it's, the more aggressive we can be. And, I know we talk all the time about full-time economic development, but something that we can come to an agreement on as a body that would help us be a little more aggressive and more competitive. I think we're already on that path. I just like to see it continue forward. And then the second thing I know, again, something we're already working on is around the city center, the library, the city offices. A lot of discussion month after month. Really solid earlier in the year. Something that we can actually execute on. Again, I think we're already down the road on those, so we're in a good position, but it'd be nice to dive deep, put a lot of hours into those efforts.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Craig, I guess we're next. If we're reading our reverse order.
It's just fine. So just to second a little bit what Leslie was talking about, vacant buildings are one of my pet peeves of this. They drive me crazy. They're a safety hazard. They provide more crime. There's lots of things going on there. So anything economic driven that can help us with the vacant buildings in these areas will help get those more economically moving forward is great. The one other one I thought about is as I read the emails before, is I really think our cemetery is really a gem. It's a little bit off the beaten path of the road there, but it actually brings a lot of attention to our city. And I think one of the things we can tell is how fast we're selling lots in the second phase and things like that will continue. So I think as we continue to develop the cemetery, I'd like to see us start working on the armed services memorial. We talked about it for a couple of years. Maybe start to get that ball rolling a little more. Something that recognizes all branches of the armed services and some things like that. Maybe to develop that cemetery a little more.
Perfect.
So, I like some things last year. I'd like to continue on, and everybody's kind of alluded to it, but the zoning in the city, I'd like us to continue to try and go through it and get it where we really feel like we should be, especially in this, but especially those two areas we've been talking about, and get that more locked down.
Hey, we've got the items above there. Will you just tell me so I can put them in right here? Which two areas specifically? Kind of for the zoning revamp.
West of Main Street, mostly that area. And then I guess I always think of, we need to look at the RE1 zone. That area, just make sure that we really have been zoned where we want to go so that it's not killing every developer come in and ask for a reason. We really want it to be about what we want. So they know it's more clear, I guess. Then the other thing I think COVID kind of hit us a bit on this, but it'd be nice to get some more community involvement that we intended to do some of the meetings.
You only put city committees. That was a big goal this past year, and we've got a long list that the mayor's been looking over of individuals that we've narrowed down to serve on those committees. Like you said, COVID derailed that, but in the next few months, it's going to become a reality. Hopefully, I'm very hopeful. I was very hopeful last February, but I'm actually a little bit more realistically hopeful this spring.
And maybe with what's going on, we can think of some other ways to make that happen. I mean, if we have to go to Zoom to do it, maybe you'll get a better turnout.
I appreciate the concept of made, they're all good ones. Buzzy is like right in my head because we're a lockstep there. He said virtually the same things that I'm going to say. Maybe starting with the community center area and the city offices. I think we're at least talking about it now. There's going to be some progress there. I'd really like to see that be in planning mode and becoming to, we have some deadlines in place, we know what our action plan is, and what we're going to that. And as far as economic development, I was thinking about how budgets work and how cities work, and cities need money, and economic development is a revenue generator. It's better than raising property taxes, and I think pretty much everybody in the community would say, you know what, if you have a choice of getting the money from somebody else or having me pay for it myself, I'd rather have somebody else do it. And that's a good reason to do economic development and do it smartly. The focus area that I would maybe add to that would be, I'd really like to see us to focus on the 91 area. It could look better. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there that's not happening. I'm super grateful that something's going to happen with the Kmart because I think that's going to help us a ton. But just in general, how that looks and attracting people to that area to have viable businesses down there, just kind of a feel of a successful business area, again, pointing to South Logan. I just think about the mess that was 5-10 years ago, just crappy down there. And even the south end of Smithfield a few years ago, with the leases, there were a lot of vacant places there. They've done a good job of getting that filled up. I feel like that's where we are right now in North Logan, some of our areas where businesses are coming on. It just doesn't look as good. Signs aren't looking as good as they should. It's just it doesn't represent maybe what we think that we are. So I'd like to see that have more of a focus area.
Thanks, Chris. Roger.
So I guess with the most knowledge, when I got on the council 9 years ago, Bruce was 50. So now that 9 years later, it's good to kind of bring up some points. But I just kind of my emphasis, I think we've got a lot better infrastructure. I think on the council that I've been on for a while, I want to see, we've done a great job with the impact fee study. And so we have the tools in place, but we need to back it with money. So now that we see all this growth, I mean, I just kind of water, sewer, and trash. What are we doing infrastructure-wise so that we don't have some big bond later on? We're making decisions now that allow us to be, like we have in fiscal. I think we've been awesome the 9 years I've done it. Fiscally great. But, with money cheap now, do we need to make some decisions to move forward to have the water, like we've been saying, big tanks and water, because it's a great time to borrow that. Because if you look down the future, we look 10 years, here's a crazy thing now. We would build our city office building 5 years ago. You would have been $110 a square foot. Now commercials $190 to $200 a square foot. So I don't want to have that, catch up to us with the infrastructure, with sewer. So I just think we just make sure, and there might be some tough decisions with, property taxes or back to economic development. We'd love to see just economic development drive a lot of that. But you might have to make some decisions so that there's not a 90% increase, and you might only have 10 over the next 10 years. I mean, I think we're on the right track, but we have to make some pretty hardcore decisions with how fast it's growing. I just say infrastructure, I agree with the others, but I just think that's what one of the main reasons for good roads, we have enough water, and do we have enough decisions to say no more development until we have that water? I mean, we haven't had to do that, but what is that? That line.
Thanks, Roger. This is a good discussion. I'd like to, rather than, not unlike personal New Year's resolutions, there's a tendency to write them down and then not look at them for another year. I'd like to revisit these quarterly over the course of the year so that we can have some discussions about what we're doing in the course of our council meetings to address these things so that we can do a better job of having our goals guide our decision making rather than just have whatever shows up on the agenda drive the flow of what this council is able to achieve in the upcoming year. So Alan, if you could help us kind of reflect on these periodically, know this is always in the back of your mind, the helping run of our minds is a helping.
If we're not achieving them, I'll just not bring it up. So, but that's very good. Sorry, Mayor. That's a very good point.
Thanks. I will, there wasn't a thing said that I don't think is high priority for the city. Economic development is an important thread that ran through all of our discussions, because if we don't, if we're not able to grow our economy, we don't have the right places for our residents to work, we don't have the financial stability that our residents need because they don't have the right kind of jobs and employment opportunities, and that has budgetary implications to the city as well. I'm really concerned about water. I know we have some good things in place that are moving. I'd love to hear back from whether the Crockett folks have heard anything back on the grant that they applied for.
Yes, they did receive that. So we had 2 meetings this week on that. Sorry, I should bring you up to date on that. It's very heavily moving forward with the NRCS. So it's one of those types of grants that's going to have a lot of meetings, a lot of strings, a lot of review and analysis going forward. They've received the first tranche of funding, I'll call it. And what that does is that covers the initial EA, the environmental assessment that they'll be looking at. It's kind of like a smaller version of an environmental impact statement. And they'll be going through that along with a lot of the discussions of how to get it from point A to point B. And point A to point A is defined, that's near First Dam. Point B is that they haven't defined and how far they can take those monies. They'll need another tranche of funding to see how far they can take the design and some of the installation at that point. But the good news is that they got in, they received it, they qualified, they were very high on the list with the way that it was written. Hats off to JEB for helping with that. And then this lines us up for future funding as well. And we want to get it all the way to Hyde Park as far as the piping is concerned. But what I'm hearing is the first set of funds that they either receive now or they will receive with the next one would take it to, we were pushing as far as we could. I was telling them absolutely 2200 north. I think they went as far as 19th north or 16th north. I said absolutely 2200 north, and then hopefully all the way to 3100 north at the minimum to get it to that pipeline that actually sends it west. And so that was one of the goals. Sorry, and the Crockett project is basically we call it the Twin Ditch, this canal right here, east of the city office, going all the way from First Dam through Logan City. We're working with Logan City in North Logan, and then it goes out to Hyde Park and sends. That one doesn't go all the way to Smithfield, just heads west in Hyde Park. And so it would be piping it, it would be a stormwater, it would be a trail. It's a lot of multifaceted project. Sorry, Mayor, I just bring you up to date on that.
That's fantastic. That's very good news. The more secondary irrigation we can provide as the project does, the better off we are in terms of our irrigation system. Much cheaper to conserve than it is to generate new supply.
Yep.
And then the echo Leslie and Bruce, I'd like to see things move forward. We have a variety of capital needs in the city, and the city office, library, community center is right at the center of how we be able to manage our space needs. To be able to continue to provide a high level of service to our residents. The city, when Roger and I started on the city council, there were 8,000 people in North Logan. We're now pushing 12. That's a 50% growth rate in 9 years. And a survey that I saw today conducted by Utah State, I don't know what the basis was, that said that North Logan's grown by 60% in the last 10 years. And so, and we were right at the top of, on a percentage of per capita basis, among the highest growth cities in the state of Utah. And so we're governing a different city than North Logan was 10 years ago. We want to set our land use, economic development, water infrastructure, all of those things have to be well planned because the growth isn't done. And I wouldn't be surprised to see North Logan hitting 20,000 in another 10 years, or if not sooner. And so the growth is going to come. It's just a matter of whether we actually do our due diligence now to be prepared for it. And that's going to include our facilities, office, library, parks, infrastructure in terms of water, sewer, roads. There's a lot of work to be done on these important issues. Economic development is the key thing that makes it all possible. So I think we've hit on a wide range of those themes. But the one thing I'd echo is just the growth will come whether we're ready for it or not. But what the city looks like 20 years from now, long after all of us are done, is going to depend in large measure on choices that this body makes in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's just my thing. Alan, anything else you're looking for from us in terms of these goals?
No, if you give me too many, we won't achieve them. But these are very good goals. I'll put them, basically I'll shift this sheet around. We have our mission statements before this. I'll take this sheet and probably put some of these goals up at the top. And as the mayor's advised, probably quarterly, I'll just put a note in the calendar that we'll bring this back, take a look at these things and say, where are we achieving, where are we not? What can we do a little bit better job on? And when I say that, staff, me, bring it back to the council. So I think it's fantastic though. These are spot on.
Okay, next item then is discussion of COVID-19 and CARES Act. You might have thought we were done with CARES Act funding, and we are. I think we probably extended all of it just before Congress took action and extended CARES Act funding through sometime, I think, midsummer. But this body gave good direction. Again, we were among the first to receive these funds and start using them in Cache Valley, and many of our policies and procedures have been mimicked, not just in the valley, but statewide in terms of some of these things. So, Alan, do you have any other specifics on this that you wanted to go over?
One very quick item and then another item that might need your head nod. One item is just a quick update. The feds came out and said that we have until December 31st of 2021 to spend our CARES money, which every single city manager that I spoke with said this would have been fantastic to know 3 or 4 months ago before we made very quick decisions on they were good decisions. I think we would have prioritized them probably a little bit differently at that point. Regardless, the state said they want to extend it more towards June. That would be the deadline. Regardless, we are committed. We've already committed to spending those funds by the end of December, which we've essentially done. So our CARES Act funding is basically eaten up. There's no more funding at this point. Everything now basically just comes out of our city coffers at this point. So just coming out of general fund, each department's budgets when it comes to masks and other things going forward. That's if we have to purchase more at some point, that's where it'll come out of. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is just really quickly going over this. When Corona first hit in March, when Congress was looking at it, they passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This was before the CARES Act. And what that did is it essentially gave employees 2 weeks off with pay if they had to quarantine or some other measure. They were still getting a handle on it at the time as I look at the actual act, how they were handling each of the items. But as we look through that actually expires December 31st of 2020, and it wasn't extended beyond that point. So essentially we have to come up with our own temporary policy at this point. A lot of cities are kind of scrambling right now. Some cities are being very strict, but when I heard about those strict policies, someone else pointed out in kind of an email chain that says, and they hit the nail on the head, if you're overly strict, you're going to endanger your staff. Meaning if you don't give any type of relief or opportunity to quarantine, you're going to encourage sick people to come into work and infect other people at your workforce, which wipes out your entire staff as far as being at the city office. So what this does, we kind of dumbed it down and just said, We're going to follow the Bear River Health Department standards for testing, for quarantining, everything that relates to. And then the second point is we've got a lot of resources now. So if people are quarantining, testing, waiting for results, if they are sick, if they test positive, we've got the opportunity there to exhaust every resource to telework. So that's the first thing. They have to exhaust fully the opportunities. Now, if they're extremely sick, they're not going to be able to telework. And so what it is we're going to exhaust every measure to telework, and then the hours that need to be made up, the city's just going to have to eat those hours. But there is a cap on those. And what it is it's essentially the same as what it was before. From April 1st last year to April 1st of this 2021, it would just be 80 total hours for a full-time employee and 40 total hours for a part-time employee. And there's a little bit more details in here. It does go over rapid testing following that they are available. They'd have to follow the Logan City protocol for that. They've given us a sheet that's been sent out to all the staff as to how that would happen, encouraging them to use that if they do qualify. But again, that's just it's a temporary policy, and if it's still in effect until April 1st, this is a North Logan City specific policy, like a head nod policy. On April 1st, it would just expire, or the city council and the mayor could extend it at that time.
I think that timing is good, especially when the vaccine comes to be available. Then my opinion is this can change. At this point, the state has made clear that there's not a state level intention to do anything to make vaccines mandatory for anybody. While I would strongly encourage anyone who has the eligibility to receive the vaccine to receive it, my intent is not to mandate the vaccine received for employees of the city. But the city will support, encourage, give people opportunity and those sorts of things. We got notice yesterday that they've extended vaccine availability from just EMTs and paramedics now to basic EMTs and to all first responders. So if you're just a firefighter, nothing medical, or if you are a law enforcement officer, all of those folks are now eligible to receive vaccines. The reason I mention that is that when vaccines become available more broadly to our city staff, I think this will go out the window, and folks who choose not to get vaccinated, but have these kinds of things don't get the same, wouldn't be eligible to get the same kinds of benefits and support once a vaccine is available.
That's one thing I was going to suggest, because we're facing that right now. We have some individuals, and we've not been available for us actually 2 weeks. I've had my first one, and I have an appointment in a few more days to go get my second. We have a lot of employees, not a lot, but a few, that don't want to go get it. But if they don't, and they do get sick, a lot of these benefits that have been extended, they really are forfeiting those benefits.
Gotcha.
And that needs to be, I think, made clear to the employee.
I agree. 100%.
Cool. So the vaccine provides light at the end of the tunnel. The other vaccine update, maybe I should give the council. Initially, the state said that there would be a phase 1C for essential workers. And actually, I got a survey from the Bear River Health Department that said, how many people do you have in your city that you classify as essential workers? And I wanted to respond by saying everyone who works for our city is an essential worker. We can't really dispense of them. Water, sewer, garbage, essential services needed to first responders, law enforcement, those would kind of hit a level, and frontline workers like me and Mary, or our library folks that have lots of contact with the public that identified as well. The state legislature, it turned out, got lobbied by every industry in the state to get their workers designated as essential workers. The grocery stores showed up and said, our workers are essential. And the lawyer showed up and said, we're essential, and everybody else showed up, and finally, I think very wisely, the state just said, we're not gonna be able to do the essential work if we pull it. So while I understand and respect the merit of that decision, it does mean that basically, once we get through all the healthcare workers, home health is included, from what I understand, first responders, the next thing they're gonna do is say, if you're over 75, you can get vaccinated. And then it's gonna be 60, yeah, Bruce will be eligible. It'll be over 75, I guess, if I understand. And then over 65, and then they haven't really designated the state's current window for all you adults in Utah being able to get a vaccine is the remarkably wide window of between March and June. And so that gives you a sense of what the level of uncertainty is on what the supply is going to look like. Johnson and AstraZeneca have gotten a long way from this. But the key thing is, if we can get our workers, our employees, an opportunity to be vaccinated, then we don't have to worry about these kinds of policies.
This is poorly written. I just wrote it in there very quickly on that super clear screen. It basically says if a vaccine is made available to an employee and they opt to not receive the vaccine, they will not be eligible for COVID-19 paid leave if they do become sick with the virus.
And even a quarantine situation, I think, as well, they don't get those.
As you know, the states is it's an active protection for businesses. For litigation.
The state legislature takes an action to shield business.
I know that they said that federally they weren't, but in some states, and I had all that.
I don't think any, that was one of the points of contention in the congressional, that held up the congressional package.
Yeah.
And with the new Congress coming in, I don't think we're going to see support for that petition. We did get something from the state legislature.
I say that because you start making rules about vaccine versus whatever.
Well, any questions or further discussion? Is everybody okay with where we're at?
Kind of a head nod. It's quasi-administrative because there's no budgetary.
All right, with that, we're through our agenda and we can go on to our reports from officer. Let's start in the back with Chief Black.
Mayor. Good 21, right? Okay, so department update for the police department. As of today, or at least the last officer out of FPO, so everybody has been through the training and successfully completed out of our new hires and those that have been in that training program. We have an employee that was part-time with us that left for some reasons a while back. He came back and said, I'd like to come back. We had a part-time opening. We hired him back because he's an exceptional officer. Nathan Newman, I know Craig probably knows who Nathan is. He's a great guy, and we're very honored to have him back in this department. So he'll start tomorrow out with shifts, which is great because he's worked for us, he knows the area, he knows the system. So that's been a benefit as well. So, our weekly stats. Sorry, I apparently missed that attachment again, Mayor. You had to remind me the last time. Tonight, we decided to tell me at the beginning of the meeting that they weren't attached today. So I sent those out quickly. And we had 99 calls from December 27th to January 2nd and 53 traffic contacts during that same time. We hired a victim advocate / grant writer not too long ago, Julie Jacobson, and she's been extremely busy, and I think she's been very valuable to the citizens that we're serving here in the community. It's been a great thing to have her in the office. And we've had a lot of people walking the office just without having a case yet. We already have an advocate there that's able to help them through the process of services and the support that they need. So that's been a benefit. But she's also been writing grants. She got us a grant that we were awarded, gave us 3 in-car cameras and 11 new portable breath testers, PTs. So I can't read it. So, I know, these things are tight.
You can take your mask off.
So that's going to be a plus. That's going to reduce some of the expense that we have for supplies and this whole equipment. So that's going to be a good thing. We'll get some in-car cameras and portable breath testers for the officers. So, that was a plus. Sorry, I lost my spot here. I kind of bounced around a little bit and I went to delete the stats. Things have been good. We are fully staffed now with this last hire of our part-time position. We are not full that way. We've maintained that status since the last 3 or 4 months. So I'm very pleased. The morale of the department has been exceptional, and hopefully, when you interact with the officers, you'll see that as well. A lot of new faces, but many of you guys an excellent crew working for the police department. Somebody, the mayor said that in the last 10 years, I was actually back there researching while you guys were holding council meeting, but he said that the city has grown about 50%, I think he said, in the last 10 years. For the police department, our increase has been about 60% in the last 10 years, an increase of citizens that we serve. So I thought it was very interesting because I was just running those numbers tonight, looking at the census numbers and things. So anyways, there has been a large increase in both North Logan and Hyde Park. So, but we're honored to serve those citizens and look forward to continuing to do that. Any questions for us? Commissioner Needham's comment? Okay.
We're going to Hyde Park tomorrow night still?
Yes, Hyde Park or the Unity Tuesday. You are.
Okay. Thanks.
We are going to start in this afternoon if we can. If there's nothing there, you were there.
Fantastic. I'll be there.
Okay.
Spencer?
Nothing for me.
Gordon? Scott? Great.
We have the newsletter.
Oh, thank you. So it's that time of year where we need to
If I want to write these down.
where I'd like to invite members of the city council to choose a month where a member of the city council writes the mayor's message.
Most experienced to least experienced.
So I'm looking
It's most
for,
seasoned.
Most seasoned, thank you.
I'm looking for a February newsletter writer, all right, in March, and then just alternate every month. So it gives us February, April, June, August,
November.
and
October.
I'll take August.
Tell me who's doing what? October is who? Who's doing February?
Roger.
Tirza.
April?
So,
It's actually Tirza that will be our
yeah, so
writing.
when does my wife need that?
April?
Craig or Brad?
Brad?
I'll take June. What do I got?
You got April.
When do I need to get them?
I'll send a reminder.
So for February, since I got that, what's the deadline it has to be in to you?
I need to get it about the 15th through the 17th, somewhere in
Oh,
there.
Good thing that's near Valentine's Day. You'll be
Yeah.
messaged a lot.
I'm sure. Who was August?
Craig, were you August?
No, Craig was June.
There's half May.
You're August.
I'm August, okay.
Buzzy's August?
Wait, and then
October?
Bruce is October. Okay.
You have.
That's, that is the easiest one.
I have
Pumpkin
November.
walk.
you guys do. So
And then what
You
about
love the
December? Are you
pumpkin
gonna do December?
I'll do November.
November and December. Okay.
So do you need someone for May?
No, Jamin is May.
Oh, okay.
Did you want?
Fine. Fine, May's the earliest, so anything May.
You're gonna do switches, you have to tell me.
You'll get an email from Marie, when it's time.
I was the first volunteer for the last one.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you.
I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to reach out to the community, and it also helps me to not have to write a message every single month. So there are some mayors in the valley who write newsletter messages that are seriously, I'm not kidding, a page and a half long. And the mayor's message is longer than our entire newsletter. In some communities, we usually keep it fairly brief, but I think it's just a good opportunity to talk about what you see as important issues. So,
Keep it to 3 sentences.
yeah. Anything else for you?
Nope, that's
Okay.
it.
Scott. Oh wait, did I already have it?
Yeah, I've got my name.
All right, Alan.
It's a new year, nothing. I want to be kind to the city council.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Buzzy?
No.
Brad?
I don't have much, I just wanted to, on the directives that we just did, I agree that we can bring up evaluation. Really, I wonder if we should look at it and maybe even look at prioritizing. And also, I wonder if staff, from their perspective, you know, some of them have anything that should maybe go on that list.
I think what we'll do, that's a good point. We'll take the priorities, and if you have one that you really are passionate about, what we'll do is we'll take those and kind of channel those into their action items, but also like the water master plan, the roads kind of things coming up. Those are infrastructure related, and then economic development master plan. We probably need to bring a draft before everyone in the next few weeks or a month. So again, that quarterly reminder is going to bring that to the forefront of our minds to say, we really have to emphasize these things with the staff and have them come and report on their progress.
And I guess I was saying, if staff's got some directives that they feel like can go in there with it, I'm certainly up here with, you know, what those might be, because sometimes they're, you know, way more outlined stuff than me, especially in particular areas. But maybe it's stuff we can help with.
That's a good point. I'll get with them and just have them prioritize that. Maybe just say, there's something we could slide in that's very high priority for them that they're hearing or working on.
That's helpful. Thanks, Brad.
Just one thing to announce, and then another, just a question I have. With the first of the year, the SIMS system did dissolve. And so that is up and going now. It's 3 separate systems. It's pretty exciting for us as part of the Logan Fire Department and North Logan, because we control our own destiny with our ambulance services now. And one of the things we're most excited about is we're able to establish an enterprise fund with the ambulance funds that come in and charges for services. So we can invest that directly back into our ambulance system, and the enterprise fund is always a big deal. So that's going to be very helpful going forward as we see where that system takes us. The other one is I worked a lot with Zach Covington. We need to adopt that, is my question.
We'll talk about it tomorrow night at the, what is your for interest, the pre-disaster mitigation. That'll be at Planning Commission tomorrow.
In order to qualify, we did ours last night. We worked a lot with Zach. So we did ours.
He's done a great job. Yeah, that'll be tomorrow night with Planning Commission. Expect that probably in a couple weeks at the city council level.
Chris?
Just a couple of quick things. I've been thinking about this. I want to just state it. Just thanks to all the city works, but the parks and rec, the basketball and all the stuff that's going on, everything that happens there. For me, I really enjoy having those things in the community. I know they're hard and they're expensive, and I just want to say that they do a great job putting all this stuff together, and I very much enjoy being able to use them, and I think it's a part of our responsibility that the quality of life within our city is important, and it has a big play on that. So I'm just grateful for how great a job they do. Also, plowing has just been great. I get up pretty early. It's usually done. And so, nice job on that with the snowstorms we've had recently and staying on top of that. I don't know where any mailboxes we've knocked over any cars that we've had, so. Nice to see that.
Well, knock on wood on that one. Yeah.
I should.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for that. It's a good job.
Thanks, Bruce. I don't have anything on top of that this evening, so we'll, if there's a motion to that effect, we'll adjourn and be back in 2 weeks. Motion from Craig, is there a second? Second. A second from Brown, all in favor?
Aye.
Folks, thanks, everybody.
You got yours, Kenny? Bruce and I were talking about it on the way in.
Yeah, did you feel like it?
Well, my arm feels in time. I can see one.